Back on March 3rd, I took my first trip to Izu-Atagawa to do some deep sky imaging, which was described in episode 32 of Astrophotography Japan, published several weeks ago. I took a rather spontaneous one-night trip when there was surprisingly a rare, clear night on May 16th, even though on this particular night the winds were very strong and gusty. And due to that wind, it was not a particularly good time for astrophotography, and hence I decided not to bring along my tracking mount and premium astrophotography gear. My intentions were to primarily do some visual astronomy and to play around with a SEESTAR S50 unit that I had on loan to see its performance under the dark Bortle Class 4 skies. I stayed at the Izu-Atagawa Ocean Resort, only meters away from the beach. Still somewhat off-season, the rates were excellent, only about 1/3 of the peak summer month prices. The view from my balcony was fabulous, looking east and southward across the ocean expanse. But overall, I do highly prefer the Prince Hotel, where I stayed on the previous trip to this hot spring and beach resort town. In this video, taken from my balcony, perhaps you can get an impression of the high winds on this evening, which were a significant issue. In fact, the ocean pier that I was excited about in my earlier Izu-Atagawa trip video was too exposed and subject to ocean spray on this day, so it was not considered a possible imaging site for that evening. Before diving into the astro imaging details, let me introduce you to this amazing hot spring geyser that I found along a side street here in Izu-Atagawa. In this area of the Izu Peninsula, apparently the water is boiling hot as it comes out of the ground, and with incredible force, as you can see in this video. The whitish, rocky deposit that builds up appears to be some kind of calcification from the mineral-rich water.
Smell the sulfur dioxide.
Clearly, I am here along the eastern shoreline of the Izu Peninsula for the incredible dark views over the ocean in these Bortle Class 4 skies. In my search for the best imaging site, I walked along an old and nearly abandoned oceanside road, which was blocked to normal traffic by some removable barriers. I walked from the ocean resort northward to a place called Anagiri Bay, shown here on this map. It was a picturesque cliffside bay with some fishing boats hidden among the rocky shores and including a few old decrepit structures along the rocky coast. Falling rocks in this area were clearly a problem as indicated by the sign, so I needed to stay alert. After reaching a dead end, I traced my steps back to a bend in the road on the rocky outcropping that offered spectacular views to the northeast and south. However, protruding out into the ocean, this rocky outcropping was very exposed to the fierce wind, making it somewhat risky and unsuitable on this particular night. So my search continued. I needed a location that was more sheltered, and I soon found that about halfway back to the Ocean Resort Hotel.
I think right here.
This street area was 100 meters beyond the barriers and slightly protected by the concrete wall. It was flat and wide and had good views to the east and southeast. Still quite windy, but it was the best I could find. So I made a mental note of the location for later and decided to go out for some dinner. On the recommendation of a Japanese-American guy that I met on the streets, thanks Darren, I had dinner at the Oboro Izakaya. Izakaya means pub in Japanese. It was only a 3-minute walk from my hotel, and it appeared to be only one of very few dining establishments open in the town early that evening. The inside was typical and traditional with spacious seating, not like the cramped tables that are common in Tokyo or Yokohama. Besides fish and sashimi, to my delight, one of their other specialities was yakitori. This is mostly skewered and barbecued chicken, including other items such as shrooms, veggies, pork, etc. It is one of my favorite izakaya foods, and it goes well with alcohol. Of course, I could not resist the excellent selection of Japanese sake that I saw behind the counter and in the refrigerators. They even had a tasting flight from which I could choose 3 different brands. I had dinner with a couple of Chinese tourists that I met there at the restaurant, both highly educated professionals, and I ended up drinking at least another 1 or 2 glasses of sake besides the flight. So if you ever visit Izu-Atagawa, I definitely recommend the Oboro pub. The yakitori is fantastic. I will certainly go back. When I got back to my hotel, it was already dark, but I was most interested in viewing the Milky Way, which was not rising until around midnight. So I caught a few hours sleep, which after 4 or 5 glasses of sake was no problem. I woke startled around 10:30 p.m., worried that I had slept the whole night. Thank goodness I had not. I grabbed my gear, which was already packed, and got to the imaging site lickety-split. It turned out to be quite dark, with no artificial lights that would cause me any imaging or viewing problems. Here is the equipment that I brought. It is set up for visual astronomy, but equipped with an ASI Air and a smaller finder scope attached to an astro camera. The rig also has a green laser to help with manual sky navigation. Notice this is on a manual Alt-Az mount. The actual equipment details are given here. Admittedly, this is a fairly small telescope for visual astronomy, but I wanted to travel light. It is a doublet design constructed with lenses made from FPL53 and lanthanide glass. It's good quality. Under Bortle Class 4 skies here in Izu, it provides nice wide-field views of the heavens. My plan for electronic assisted manual sky navigation would be driven by the ASCAR FMA 135 astrograph lens. Together with the ASI 533MC one-shot color planetary camera, the OTA captures about 4.5 degrees of sky along each side of the square sensor. I have done this plenty of times in the past. Plate solving the images helps with rapid identification of the visual sky location, speeding up the process of finding targets tremendously. My newest accessory is this ADM laser pointer ring set that is specifically designed with a screw interface for easy on-off engagement of the laser. Frankly, it is about time that some company came out with an accessory product like this. Unfortunately, it did not come with a Cinta-style mini Vixen bar for use with my telescope, but that was only a minor inconvenience. This is a front and rear view of the telescope with all the accessories ready to use. And here it is in the field, pointed at the core of the Milky Way. So I started off the night with a lot of visual observations, hoping to see a number of interesting targets that cannot be easily observed from Yokohama. Prior to that night, I made a list of deep sky objects that I wanted to explore in the Milky Way region. So I aligned my laser pointer and finder scope, and with imaging and plate solving assistance from the ASI Air, I began to search for star clusters and nebulae in the Milky Way core region that was just rising above the dark ocean in the southeast. This is a 2-hour time-lapse video made from about 250 images taken at f2, 13 seconds each, with my Canon EOS R8 camera and a 35mm RF lens. The skies got noticeably darker toward the end of the sequence, with the last frame taken at 1:45 a.m. You can also see my green laser pointer helping to align my telescope with landmark stars and other objects in the Milky Way. For some reason, I really love this particular photograph of my telescope rig perfectly illuminated against a backdrop of out-of-focus stars dotting the heavens above. In the next few slides are some screenshot images taken on my Samsung Smart Pad, such as the Eagle and Omega Nebula seen here in a 3-second exposure taken on my stationary Alt-Az mount. On the bottom left is another screenshot from Sky Safari that simulates the field of view of my square sensor camera and my telescope and eyepiece combination that gives me a 14.4x magnification. The eyepiece view is, of course, the round pink circle. I selected these two visual setups because of the close match between the camera image and the view through the eyepiece. On this particular target, I could surprisingly see the glow of the Omega Nebula dense core region, but not much of the Eagle Nebula other than its central stars. The Omega Nebula has several other names as well, including the Checkmark Nebula, and its visual brightness is about magnitude 6. The Eagle is also magnitude 6, but it is a bit more broad and diffuse. Here, I could see the star Antares and the M4 globular cluster very clearly. Unfortunately, I did not quite have the orientation of the telescope sensor matched to the Sky Safari screenshot, so you'll have to twist your neck a bit to align the images. The same is true for the rest of these photos as well. The Lagoon Nebula has an apparent magnitude of 4.6, which is very bright, and was easily visible here under Bortle Class 4 skies. I can sometimes see a faint glow from Yokohama, but nothing like what I saw here. M7, Ptolemy's cluster, was bright and visible within a dense Milky Way star field. And in this field of view, I could see two globular clusters at the same time, M22 and M28. The former is magnitude 5.1, and the latter is magnitude 6.8. Of course, I did a bit more star hopping and viewing, and then I realized something. It was so easy to find particular objects and stars in the sky and verify them with the plate-solving ability of the ASI Air that I might also be able to find geostationary satellites this way as well. So I looked at the Sky Safari simulation and zoomed into an area of sky around the constellation Ophiuchus to find altitude 48 degrees and azimuth 171 degrees. At that moment, at that position, were two close and very bright stars, Yed Posterior and Yed Prior. I never heard of these before, but they were easily visible to my eyes with just a brief search of the sky. So I pointed my green laser at those two stars, snapped a photograph, and confirmed them through the plate solving of the ASI Air. Near to them, about where this yellow star is located, are the exact Alt-Az coordinates of the suspected geostationary satellites that I saw before in Izu on March 3rd, but failed to find in Yokohama in April. Also, my field of view with the camera, and presumably the eyepiece too, was wide enough that I was probably staring right at them. So I began to take photos. I took 3-second photos and 1-minute photos, again using my finder scope on the stationary mount. In this photo on the right, which is slightly cropped and zoomed, you can see the 1-minute star trails, but also a few stationary points of light toward the bottom portion of the image. I visually repositioned my telescope a little bit and took another set of photos shown here. These images are the entire field of view of the 533MC color sensor. Here, the stationary points of light are closer to the top of the image. Again, I repositioned my telescope and took some additional images. You can see the points of light had moved again, but there also is a conventional satellite trail present in this image as well, and based on its trajectory, I'll bet this is an equatorial orbit. Now, if we just focus on the right image and compare it to the previous photograph, appearing here on the left, you can see that I identified an overlap between these two images. And identified by the blue arrows are 5 points of light that are not tracking with the sidereal movement and potentially are the geostationary satellites. But the point of this image is that these points of light are clearly objects in the sky and not hot pixels because their pattern remains the same and it simply shifts as I alter the field of view. They are truly sky artifacts, not camera sensor artifacts. And as a final proof that they are probably part of the same group of satellites that I observed 2 months earlier, I took one of the photos and I plate solved it online using astrometry.net. From the data provided, I noted the celestial coordinates provided for the center of this photograph. Next, I went to the online resource that I talked about in the previous Astrophotography Japan episode number 33 at the website of Clear Sky Tonight, so I could calculate the corresponding alt-as coordinates using their online algorithms. After doing that, I got the values shown in green. Notice they are very close to the original sky coordinates that I noted on March 3rd. And as if I needed any more proof than that, when I got back to Yokohama on the next day, I set up my visual rig again in my backyard and repeated the same process and took these two photos. It required 2-minute exposures in Yokohama to see these faint points of light due to the more extensive light pollution, but this time I was able to observe the same group of satellites from my home as well. Now, this whole satellite exercise did not result in any beautiful or stunning images, and you might think it was kind of pointless. But to me it was intellectually satisfying because I learned a lot about satellite orbital dynamics, celestial coordinate conversions, and how to use complementary visual and imaging tools to find orbital objects in the night skies. So personally, I enjoyed the challenge and I learned from it. And then finally, sadly, all alone off to the side, while I was doing all of this visual astronomy, I had the SEESTAR S50 challenging a few deep sky targets just to see its performance under the darker Bortle Class 4 skies here in Izu. Keeping the rig low to the ground was intentional because remember, the winds were very strong and gusty the entire night. Now, I am not a big enthusiast about SEESTAR, and I do not own this particular unit. And at this time I have no personal intention to buy one, but in my opinion, it is a mighty impressive machine with outstanding cost performance, as long as you can live with the limitations. Here are 4 targets I captured during the early morning hours. Each of these photos are 15 minutes or less of integrated exposure time. And the 4 images you see here are the original JPEG images that the SEESTAR automatically processed, saved, and displayed on my SmartPad. For such short exposures, I was very impressed with the signal to noise and the clarity of the images. But later the following week, I accessed the original SEESTAR raw data files and did my best to post-process them with my limited skills employing GIMP, Graxpert, and Topaz Denoise AI. These are the resulting photographs. Again, they are only 15 minutes or less of integrated exposure times. The images are surprisingly good for a machine that costs only $500, hence my comment about outstanding cost performance. Well, thanks for sticking with me on this astrophotography adventure. This video turned out to be quite a potpourri of activities for probing objects in the night sky, including some in near-Earth orbit and others in the far reaches of the galaxy. It's all about having fun and appreciating our magnificent universe. This is a fascinating and amazing hobby, don't you think? I hope you enjoyed the video and will come back again soon. Thanks for watching. I'm JP Astro Guy, my name is Paul Cheesegel, and you have been watching Astrophotography Japan.